Hello, welcome. I'd like to present to you today Romulus and Remus myth and how how Roman culture influenced the foundation myth. So here we begin. So Romulus and Remus are the descendants of Aeneas, who sailed from Troy. And their grandfather is Numitor, who was the king of Alba Longa, which is in central Italy. Eventually, Numitor's brother, Romulus, overthrows Numitor. To avoid any potential sons that might rouse trouble, Romulus has his niece, Rhea Silvia, become a Vestal virgin. What she has to do is protect the sacred fire of Vestus, and in order to do so, she has to stay a virgin. But either Mars or Hercules rapes Rhea Silvia. Okay, Livy claims it was an unknown person. So, feeling potential wrath of any god by just straight out murdering the twins that were born by Rhea Silvia, he has the bastard sons die of exposure. So, but a servant who pities the bastard sons, the twins, floats them down the Tiber River, where they're guided by Tiberinus, the river god, down the river, and they're found by a she-wolf, or Lupus, and are suckled by her and fed by a woodpecker. Soon the boys are discovered and adopted by two shepherds. The Romulus and Remus grow up, and they get in a fight with two of Romulus' shepherds, and Remus is taken prisoner. So what Romulus does, he gathers a band of other shepherds, they go, and they kill Romulus, and they free Remus. So the twins refuse to become the new kings of Alba Longa. What they do instead is they bring back Numitor as the king of Alba Longa. So instead of being the kings, they decide to found their own new city. So they go on the hills, one of the hills of, Rome has 7 hills. And on one of those hills, the Palatine Hills, where Romulus wants to have his city. But Remus wants his city to be founded on the Aventine Hill. So the brothers start to quarrel, and then Romulus starts building a ditch and a wall around his Palatine Hill. Remus begins to mock Romulus, and his wall. So some say that Romulus struck and killed Remus. Others, Livy says that Remus just simply jumped over the wall and died when he landed. But according to Livy, the establishment of Rome was April 21st, 753 BCE. So Rome would be about 2,767 years old, according to Livy. So we come to the part of the rape of the Sabine women. So Romulus names the city Rome after himself. He's not the only one to do that. Alexander. And the ruling part is established, which would be the patricians. And a lot of people flock to the new city, but the people who flock to the city are men, and they are running themselves. They themselves are running from the law. So there's a large amount of men, and because of this, there's not enough people to secure the next generation. So what they do is Romulus cracks a plan. He invites the Latin and Sabine men to the Circus Maximus, where they have a feast. While the men are feasting there, the Romans go and they take the Sabine and the Latin women. And this, of course, pisses them off, so a war erupts. The Romans are besieged by the Sabines, and all hope for victory is lost. But Romulus prays to Jupiter, and he hopes that the Romans will achieve victory, which they do. So, Romulus and the Sabine leader, Tactius, decide to rule jointly. So after 5 years, Tactius is accused of harboring fugitives who killed ambassadors from Rome's ally neighbor, the Lavinians. So to repent this, Tactius is sent to the Lavinians and sacrifice in front of the Lavinians to the gods. So while on this mission, Tactius is assassinated by I wonder who, and Romulus becomes the sole ruler of Rome. So Romulus rules for 20 years after the death of Tactius. He expands Rome through war, and eventually even adding Alba Longa after the death of Numitor. So during his rule, the Senate became much less important, and Romulus became a bigger autocrat. So the death of Romulus is debatable. Some say he ascended and became a god after his death. Others say he was just simply killed by the Senate. And here we can see the Capitoline wolf, which is the wolf itself, is a 5th century BCE Etruscan work, while the twins were added somewhere in the 15th century. So why is the myth structured the way it is? We have to, the way, myths always have something, a grain of truth in them, or here we can see it's kind of a reflection of Roman culture. So first, let's begin with Mars or Hercules. Mars was the god of war. He corresponds to the Greek Ares, and we have Hercules, who's known for his strength, and he corresponds with the Greek Heracles. So we have, Mars is the father, potential father at least. Oh, sorry, call Mari. Because Romans like to wage a lot of war. Even in the myth, they waged war for 20 years. They waged war against the Sabines and the Latins, and in real history, they waged war against pretty much everyone. They beat the Carthaginians. They took Gaul. They took Britannia. They took Iberia. They took pretty much everything. Greece. Egypt. The Romans fought a lot. So, Romans and war was very important. War was, Rome was a very highly militarized society. They were the first to establish a professional, permanent, standing army. And, the armies were known as legions, and the soldiers in the legions were known as legionnaires. And training in Rome, in a Roman legion, was very tough. Here, I'm going to show you a video from a British TV series called Horrible Histories. It's not working.
I joined the army because I like swords and fighting.
Crap.
Because I was made to, of course. But it's not all work, you know?
What do you think you're doing, you horrible little man? You're supposed to be doing stabbing practice, so stop stabbing!
Actually, thinking about it, it is all work. We train harder than any other army in history. We march 20 miles and stab us.
There we go. Sorry for that.
I joined the army because I like swords and fighting. And because I was made to, of course. But it's not all work, you know?
What do you think you're doing, you horrible little man? You're supposed to be doing stabbing practice, so stop stabbing!
Actually, thinking about it, it is all work. We train harder than any other army in history. We march 20 miles a day, build a whole fort, and then take it down again the next morning. Can't complain now.
Get your knees up, you horrible little man!
They hit you if you complain.
Left, right!
I suppose the food's not bad, though you do have to pay for it. In fact, you have to pay for everything in the Roman army. Your food, your uniform, your weapons, even your own funeral.
Of course, if you decide the army's not for you, you can always leave.
Well, the army tends to look down on deserters, about 500 feet down to be precise. So I'd recommend staying to fight. The Roman army, be the best, or they'll kill you.
There's a little comedy right there. Anyway, I will have a link for that in the description. That's a very funny skit. So as you see, Rome's military evolved a lot. First, he started fighting in a Greek hoplite phalanx. Think the movie 300. Okay. But after the 5th century BCE, when Rome was sacked by the Celts, it was a reform in the Roman army. They were formed into a maniple system, where they fought in like little checkers, and it was much more flexible and maneuverable than a Greek hoplite phalanx. Because first you had the first line was the Stati, second line were the Principes, and the third line of soldiers were the Triarii, which is the elites. Here you can see a Greek hoplite phalanx. It was very, it was kind of like a rolling tank. But it wasn't very maneuverable. It was just very hard to do things. So here we can see what a Histati looked like, a Principe and a Triarii. These were the poorest, these were the medium, and these were the richest of the soldiers. So you can see the difference in because you have to provide your own armor and weaponry. So you can see that he's not wearing much compared to the Principe. There's only a little breastplate and one greave. They all have the same type of shield, but And these guys would be in the front, absorb the charge of the first enemy wave. These guys would back them up, and then these guys were in the rear. Oh, chilling, probably drinking wine or something. So around 113 BCE, the Cimbrian Teutones were moving in towards Rome. They destroyed two legions, and the Romans got really scared of the barbarians. So what they did was they had Marius come and reform the army. And what he did was he established what was called the Marian Reforms. And basically it was just everyone, because before Marius, only people who owned land could fight in the Roman legion. But after Marius, anyone who was a citizen of Rome could be in the legions, because all the gear was state provided. And it was standardized as well. So this is the first time in history you have something like this. So this is what a Roman legionary looked like after the Marian Reforms. Very, very tough. And so the Romans also established an auxiliary system where, since they weren't good at much, they were only really good at heavy infantry. That was their forte. They established what was called the auxiliary system, where they would hire people who were doing better at doing other things than the Romans were. So they had archers from Crete, slingers from Bavaria, Numidian cavalry, German and Celtic cavalry as well, and also soldiers. Like Caesar, he recruited Germans during his campaign in Gaul. So they would have other people fight with them because they weren't good at much. So, and here you can see a Balearic slinger from the Balearic Isles, Numidian cavalrymen, and the auxiliary cavalrymen. So let's also look at political strife in Rome. So in the myth, you can see political strife as well. The Numitor usurped by Amulius, Remus killed by Romulus, and Romulus' betrayal of Tacitus, because people just get assassinated. And civil war, it was a very big part of Roman life. It was just it happens, and you have to deal with it. The greatest civil war you can probably look at is when Augustus becoming emperor, because after Pompey the Great was defeated by Caesar, Caesar became dictator, and eventually was declared dictator for life. So soon the Senate began to feel insecure, and they killed Caesar. Caesar's adopted nephew Octavian, he sees this opportunity and stirring up conflict, and eventually he fights a civil war and he wins. And Octavian himself declares himself emperor and changes his name to Augustus. Even in the late Roman Empire, there's a lot of political strife, a lot of turmoil going on. You had, because the legions became backed by the generals, they were funded by the generals, by their own personal money. The soldiers weren't loyal to Rome, they were loyal to their generals. So when, sometimes you can have yourself be a general the first day, second day you're emperor, third day you're dead, about 20 emperors ruled in a 50-year period between 235 and 285, so there's a lot of wars going on between the Romans themselves. That's why it was one of the leading causes of the decline of the Roman Empire, at least the western half. So you can see, the Roman culture reflecting on the Romulus and Remus myth. Rome was very heavily militarized. Romulus led wars for 20 years, expanding the Romans, and adopting, after he conquered Numitor, after Numitor's death, Alba became part of Rome, and it was kind of a, how do we say, what's the word I'm looking for? It was just slowly incorporated into the Romans. That's what the Romans did. They would conquer you, they would slowly they Latinize people, and they combined this culture. So, and war was just a fact of life. It happened, you had to deal with it. You're either fighting the war or leading the war. Either that. Civil war is also common. A lot of people died in civil wars. And there were a lot of ambitious men trying to seize power for themselves, especially in the late Roman Empire. So, I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and happy holidays, and Happy New Year. Thank you so much.